Welcome to EvolvedNest Interviews, a showcase of wisdom keepers who keep the wise ways in mind and guide the rest of us. My name is Darcia Narvaez, and the EvolvedNest is a set of components that we put together that we've observed, that anthropologists have observed and others, that wise, peaceful societies provide their children and their adults throughout life, most of the components. And those are soothing perinatal experiences, on-request breastfeeding, positive moving touch, no negative touch, positive climate, welcoming climate, self-directed social play, allo mothers, allo parents, other mothers, relationships that are responsive, nature connection, and healing practices. So today we are talking with Four Arrows, also known as Don Trent Jacobs. Four Arrows is the author of 21 books with more on the way. He's kindly asked me to help with one of them on the precepts of the Indigenous worldview that emphasizes kin centricity. And for many years, Four Arrows has been publishing books and essays relating to the Indigenous worldview, as well as education, critical theory, and wellness. He's been a professor at Fielding Graduate University for 17 years. He has an extremely interesting biography. I urge you to look him up. He was in the Marines, he was an EMT, a horse whisperer, and has had many other adventures. A book has been written about him by Michael Fisher called Fearless Engagement of Four Arrows, the true story of an Indigenous-based social transformer. I urge you now to explore his work and ideas. They may save our species or prepare us for the next world. So for more about his work, please go to www.fourarrowsbooks.com. Hi, Four Arrows, welcome.
Well, thank you for your gracious introduction, but I'm mostly excited about how you described your work with the EvolvedNest. I mean, those items that you just clicked off just resonated. It's like it made me realize what we're missing and how we would not be in the predicament we're in had parents understood those things in this world that we've been living in for a few thousand years. So thank you for that.
Yes, well, it's an honor to have met you, and I met you at a conference some years ago. I was so taken aback by your wisdom there, and then you got me into this Indigenous wisdom idea, which is actually the way to live decently and sustainably and durably. So I thank you for all the work you've done, so many books. I've read a number of them, and it's really quite helpful, and you're such a good mentor to so many people, so thank you for that.
And now we're writing one together.
Right.
For North Atlantic Books, right? Yeah, I'm so excited about getting that started after this crazy election is over.
Right, yes. So tell me, what experiences have you had that maybe relate to the EvolvedNest? Anything in particular? I think the healing practices is probably your cat fawn approach. Sort of healing practices component is really broad. It's like how to maintain yourself as a human being and to
we can talk about cat fawn.
Yeah.
One of the things that comes to my mind, as I was listening to you talking about the EvolvedNest, I was on Pine Ridge for quite a while and lived there. Had a little geodesic dome. Rode my horse to the Oglala Lakota College, where I was dean of education, and did my Sundance vows there. And a lot of people from Europe would come, Germans especially, to see the Lakota, even though maybe not realizing that Pine Ridge, it has conditions equal to like Haiti, a third world country in terms of lifespan and all that. But the love of children and the traditional families was something that I was struck by. And I remember one day a German lady and she had a little troop with her of students, I think. And they came to me to see if I could kind of take them on a tour and introduce them to some of the spiritual leaders. And I brought them over to somebody that is a good friend, and we were standing there talking with him, and she was talking with him. I was just kind of standing behind listening after having made the introduction. And all of a sudden his boy, and I guess his boy was probably, I want to say 7 years old, it was just a guess. And very respectfully, the young boy came up while he was talking, and the father grabbed him and kind of held him over at his side and just kind of hugged him to make sure he wasn't ignoring him while he continued finishing his words. And then he said, "What's something? What's up in Lakota?" And the boy said, "I want to go ride the horse." Well, there was a horse in a corral, and I could tell that it was not an easy answer for the father, because it wasn't like, sure, go ahead. It was like he looked over at the horse, he looked at the boy, and he pondered something. Whatever it was, he pondered it, and then he said something in Lakota, I don't remember, but the boy went over to the horse, and so now he's continuing to talk. And what we didn't know at the time was this boy had never been on this horse before. And I guess, they had experiences with the horse, obviously. And the father, I think, was pondering, is he ready for this? And yet he didn't go over and show him how to do it, or be there to make sure it was safe or something like that. And the boy, he kind of looked out of the corner of his eye once in a while. Of course, I was staring at it because the horse was, pretty spirited. And the boy went ahead with trying to get a halter on it and climbing on the fence to try to get on it and all this kind of stuff. Well, the German woman and her team, you could see them more and more looking at the near mishaps that were happening as the father was talking. And you could see them getting angry almost at the poor parenting of this father. Do you see where I'm going with this? Yeah, and you can see it pretty soon. The one woman got outspoken about it, and I think the boy had fallen or something, and maybe almost got stepped on by the horse. Maybe I'm going back, 30 years, but that's how I remember this. I remember that she kind of almost insultingly said, "Don't you care about your son?" or something to that effect, right? And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, how little that you know. It's just the opposite. He is careful, he's watching, he's loving. He must have done this previous work that makes him think the boy was ready. And he's doing what Indians do. He's letting the boy, in this relative cost risk, benefit kind of a thing, learn on his own. And it was so beautiful. And it wound up being beautiful. I mean, it wound up, the boy got on the horse and got the horse to go the direction he wanted, and you could just see him light up. That was the first time that he did this. I just thought, God, I would love to hear what you have to say about how that fits into the work that you've done about Indigenous approaches to child rearing.
Yes, that has to do with the one of the precepts we're working on, non-interference. Right, to understand that the individual spirit has a purpose, has an agency, has its own wisdom. The moral compass is internalized, and you have to stand out of the way to not mess things up. That's a common perception, viewpoint among small band hunter-gatherers, which is our heritage as a human being, as a species, to live in that kind of society. And it makes me think of Jean Liedloff's book, The Continuum Concept, because she pointed that out from her stays in the Amazon with the Aquana. And she came back to the States and was trying to urge American mothers to not be so interfering, because once you start to interfere in that young child's attempts to grow and learn, as toddlers, for example, they lose confidence. And then they have to always look to you. And there was a story a student of mine told me about her friend sitting around a village in fire in Africa, and I don't remember which country, but it's probably, anyway, it's reflective of this principle where a young child was moving towards the fire and put their hand in the fire. And the American hit the child's arm out of the fire, in alarm. And the wise elder there said, if you do that, you'll have to do it the rest of their life, right? Because you've undermined their own autonomy, their own energy towards and confidence in being in the world on their own. And now they have wounded them in a way. So it's really wonderful. Thank you for that story.
Oh, well, what a beautiful name for it, the interference factor. And I think it must be really difficult in the dominant culture when a parent tries to do that with a child, and then the child becomes independent, but then everything around them seems to force them to be challenged by that, and it's the contradictions and the inconsistencies probably really are difficult for that early childhood lesson to hold, I would imagine. And I think the cat fawn that came to me in a vision, I'll just let your guests know real briefly. I when I got out of the Marine Corps, had a chip on my shoulder about the lies of Vietnam and all that, and so I took it out with doing kind of wild adventures, endurance riding on horses and whitewater kayaking on uncharted rivers. And I tried one in Mexico called the Rio Urique and had a near-death experience on it. Your readers can just put in the shaman's message on YouTube and see the narrative of it. But we came upon after I had my near-death experience with the river flooding and pushing me into a hole. We had to escape an 8,000-foot canyon that was full of dead ends and barrancas, and a group of Raramuri Cimarron people, a group of Indians still living in a very primitive way, unlike their counterparts that are up on at the top of the mountain. And they kind of would show up every once in a while to show our way out. And one of them was carrying a dead fawn that they had literally run down because they can run so well until the deer's feet were bleeding, and then they bonked it to take it back for food. And the other was, we were in a cave when we got out of the river that the river kept rising in, and we were at the top shelf. And if it rose more, we would drown. And David Card was a firefighter buddy of mine. It was the two of us. And in the middle of the night, as we were listening to the water rise, a mountain lion called an onça, kind of a rare mountain lion, walked right over our sleeping bags. And we were like a couple of kids, and we went, David, did a mountain lion just walk over our sleeping bags, that kind of thing. But then David went, yeah, good thing, because he's not here anymore. That means there's a way out of here. And that's how we got out. So the next day I had a vision, and the vision was of that fawn and the cat that weirdly turned into neon lights of the letters CATFAWN, like in downtown New York, in a city far from where the events were happening in Copper Canyon. And so the components of that, I don't want to spend all this too much time on it, but in essence, to look at it from the non-interference perspective and from other aspects that I would love for you to see how they connect, because we've never had this conversation. Concentration active transformation is CAT. And for me, that's the trance-based learning that Indigenous people use in ceremonies. For me, as someone who taught hypnosis at UC Berkeley for MFCC licensure for marriage, family, child counselors, I understand and learned hypnosis as a natural thing. Wild horses actually taught it to me. And so if concentration activated transformation means you have an intention, you go into an altered brainwave frequency through chanting, music, all various forms, and then you imagine an outcome for being a more generous person, being able to hunt better, whatever it is. That's what ceremonies are. And so we did this without knowing or caring about, what the term is. And that's been taken away from us. And it's been taken away. And children are essentially in CAT for the first 5 or 6 years of their life. That's why they can learn 10 languages, right? But we don't recognize it. So we give suggestions that are behaviors that that still they're sponging up, but they're not the good ones, right? So that's cat. Fawn are four major influences that came to me in this vision, and it took me a number of years to figure it out. Fear, authority, words, and nature. And most people listening will know how we think about fear. We avoid it at all costs. We don't like it. It's a bad thing all around. Once the fight or flight thing is over with. Authority is almost everybody except us, right? The book, the papa, the teacher, the priest, whatever. Words, we can use them as we want, and little children use them deceptively. I remember my grandson was 5 years old and was going through his parents were going through a divorce. My daughter was divorcing, and he was having some trouble, so she sent him to live with me. I'll never forget, we were sitting in a little Mexican restaurant here in where I am. When I went out to get something, when I came back, he had torn all the napkins up on the table. And I said to him, I said, well, who did that? With the tone that wasn't a good thing to do. They're not your napkins. I said, who did that? And he looked like, because he was only with me at that time for about a week, and he's with grandfather, and he's a strange place, so he kind of was a little timid, and he didn't want to own up to it. And so he pointed to someone sitting at a table and said, he did it. And right away, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's a bald-faced lie. That's not going to work down here. And so I said to him, I said, well, you know what, grandson? I said, you wouldn't have gotten in trouble for the paper thing, but we would have talked about it. You might get a little bit of trouble from me and some concern from me about if you were lying. And I said, so I'm going to walk away, and I'm going to come back, and we're going to do it all over again. And I walked away, I came back, and I said, hey, all that paper that they had in those nice little napkin holders, it's all over the table. Who did that? And I knew for sure he was going to say, I did it, grandfather. But instead, he pointed to someone else in the restaurant. And I said, okay, so we're going to put this away, and we're not going to eat dinner. We're going home without dinner, something like that. I don't know. But anyway, so this idea of truthfulness in words is what I'm getting at. Words have to be, and in indigenous cultures, verb-based languages, I don't think were an accident. They emerged from the land. And then about 9,000 years ago, when we started having surplus agriculture and started to have, like Socrates said, I can't learn anything amongst trees, only amongst men in town can I learn. He said that in Phaedrus. Plato had him say it. And so, this idea of a language that is materialistic, that's about hierarchy and society, had allowed, I think, for categorizing and misconstruing and deception, perhaps. Tom Cooper writes in his book, A Time Before Deception, that when the first treaties were broken, the Lakota people actually, and other tribes, did ceremonies because they thought they had a mental illness, and they did healing ceremonies for them, right? So words is a crucial one about, if little kids are starting to do it, and presidents do it. And then, of course, the last one is, what did you learn or not learn from the natural world, from the trees, from the cockroach that's in your room, from the ants. My doctoral students from the Navajo Nation that I have right now just did a whole thing on the lessons from ants and the origin stories. It's beautiful to read. So what I'm trying to do with Cat Fawn is to say, if you have a problem, whatever it is, look at it and say, what's the fear involved with it? And really look at it metacognitively by contrasting the two worldviews and the precepts that you and I are writing about. And then what words do I say or what authority it has given me this perspective or this fear. Was it my dad, something that he's told me when I was little? Is it something when I was in a state of fear? Because during fear, all creatures become hypersuggestible to the communication of a perceived trusted authority figure. Donald Trump, Rush Limbaugh, I think they're hypnotizing people in essence. And you know, we can, in my Prentice Hall book, I talk about how you could go up to a car accident and open the, you know, try to open the door and not be able to open it, and look inside and see a young person that's hemorrhaging. And you know, if you could, Darcia, you could with your charisma and you know, and you would kind of add your doctorate to it, you know, just to add that credibility in the dominant culture of authority. And you would say, you know, my name is Dr. Narvaez. I am trained in these things. I've called the ambulance. The worst is over. Things are being made ready for you at the hospital. The door is crushed though, and it'll be about a half hour before we can open it. And you're bleeding, and I want you to stop that bleeding. So I want you to listen to me. When I count to 3, go ahead and stop it. 1, 2, 3. During the first hour post-trauma, 90% of people in this state of hypersuggestibility will stop their own bleeding, like a yoga can do, right? And so getting in touch with nature, getting in touch with words that we speak to ourselves. You know, I had a client once that called me for a hypnosis session. And I said, what's the problem? And he said, well, I sweat profusely under my arms whenever I'm about to go into an executive meeting as the CEO. I got like 5 sports coats hanging in my closet. I've gone to doctors. I've taken medication. Somebody said I should try this hypnosis thing. And so I said, okay, we'll make an appointment. I said, what do you say to yourself, though, right before you go in? And he says, I don't know. I look at my watch and I say, I got to go to the meeting. I have to go to the meeting, you know, whatever. I said, okay, just change the next time you have your meeting and you look at your watch, just change your words to, I want to go to the meeting instead of, I have to, okay? He said, yeah. And you know, like that was, but 3 days later, he called to cancel the meeting. And I asked him why, and he said, I think you must have hypnotized me on the phone. I haven't sweated in 5 meetings. I said, are you using the new language? Yeah, but what does that have to do with it, right? So that's what the cat fawn is. So curious, I'm so curious to hear if, just from that short introduction, if you can see things in the evolved nest that might correspond to any of those 5 things: the trance kind of learning, the using fear as an opportunity to practice a virtue, which is the opposite of how we look at it, of seeing authority as only reflection on your own personal lived experience. I think we kind of already talked about that one with the horse. On the importance of being as careful as you can to express your truth in words, and of being able to use nature as a teacher.
That's wonderful. I love that the acronyms and all that it means. And you have a good article, a short article people can get in the Journal of Moral Education about this and how to apply it. So people can.
Thanks to you. You were the editor.
Yes,
that.
I was.
And you helped me write that, I recall.
Yeah, so the cat part is very much important, as you mentioned, that children are in this state for those first 6 years or so. And what the nest does for young children is keeps them in that state and doesn't disturb their learning, right? And part of what they need as part of the positive climate aspect is to have good role models and good opportunities to grow. And in civilization, and especially now in the USA, we kind of don't do that, right? We don't really welcome children, and we give them all sorts of bad role models, and then we punish them as well. So negative touch, which is very harmful, and longitudinal studies show that it makes kids more aggressive and less socially skilled. And we start to punish 2-year-olds, right? Because they're doing something I don't want them to do, or, you know. So you move them out of that cat fawn. Well, you put them into a state of fear, and they don't have any wherewithal they don't know what to do with it, and they're not trained to work with it as the fawn aspect. I think that takes a while to learn.
It does. I mean, to be able to say, okay, what is your fear? And, you know, and the fight or flight, let's put that aside. What is this chronic kind of fear that you're having, right? And then once it's described and you do, well, what, you know, so what happens if the worst case scenario and all that stuff, and you kind of get a sense of it. And then you say, if the virtues generosity, patience, fortitude, humility, honesty, courage, if those virtues, you know, or if we can explain those to you, which one do you want to work on using this fear, you know, and to bring that down to age development understandings. Oh my gosh, how it would be so. I mean, and that's what this young boy did on the horse. He had already understood that whatever fears he had, his determination, his perseverance, his humility, all these things were being practiced because of the fear. It wasn't just an avoidance. So, yeah.
Right.
And then what about authority?
Well, I think the fawn aspect is especially promoted by the vision quest in adolescence, right? Because you have to go out and find face your fear and find the authority, your spirit guide, your sense of connection to nature and the universe, right? So I think the traditional ways of raising children keep them in the cat when they're young, and then move them into the fawn capacities as they develop, after age 6, start having vision quest activities, for example. So you practice all that. And we've just sort of pulled the rug out from childhood and from development. And so people are just lost, right? And then
that's so beautiful that you mentioned the vision quest. We call them ombleche age, crying for a vision. I just yesterday, a man in his early 40s, and this is pretty regularly, asked me if I could put him up on the hill for a vision quest, right? And I'm having him make the tobacco ties now. But, it's become an industry where people actually, unfortunately, pay for these things, right? But that's a whole other story. But it's become an industry that adults are trying to do vision quest with ayahuasca, with finding an elder that is kind of authorized to do the purification lodge and put them up on the mountain. And I think that's so sad that, not that we don't do it as adults. I mean, we do it for all of our sun dances, and I still do them, regularly. But to have not had that ever, and to be doing it for the reasons that you lost, of all the things that you've lost, is kind of what you just said, right? We've lost it, right? And then how few people are even even knowing what a vision quest is.
Yeah, at least those people have paid attention to the signal that something's missing, and that there's a greater reality to tune into, right? A lot of people don't find that, and they just get caught up in some other addiction or something, right? So I think there's more, I don't know how to say it, the greater reality is waking some people up to, come on, pay attention, or we're all going to perish together here unless everyone wakes up to a new consciousness. And the participation mystique that I think Claude Levi-Strauss had mentioned, he observed all over the world in the native communities, that it was sort of poo-pooed by the anthropologists, but that's actually part of that animistic sense of the world being alive. And people, I think, have been taught to not pay attention, right? Because they were interfered with in that early childhood. And so their right hemisphere's brain development, it happens in early life. And it's part of that higher consciousness and empathy and receptive intelligence to pay attention to all the natural entities and their communications. That's inhibited and impaired then when you mistreat young children and don't provide the welcoming climate and punish them, and you don't give them meet their needs when they're young. And so that gets underdeveloped. And then people reach middle age and then they're kind of feel dead inside, right? In part because they haven't connected all that stuff together.
Yeah,
So,
and it's reinforced in universities, who are the ones training the parents, right? I mean, I've got Jane Goodall's book sitting on my bed. Every once in a while, I'd read a couple of paragraphs. And the other night, she was talking about how when she was living with the chimpanzees, and she became the first human to ever prove that animals use tools, because she saw this chimpanzee that she had named and that she was living and being able to be 5 feet away from, take a piece of stick and pull all the leaves off, sharpen it, and then use it to go get termites out and eat them, right? So she sent the pictures to Leakey, the famous guy who had put her out, knowing that she had no college experience, but that she was an impeccable observer. And he had money for this adventure with the chimpanzees in Africa. Well, she writes in the book that she didn't know it at the time, but everyone in the world was calling her a buffoon, a drunk, or on drugs, or totally incapable to be out there doing this kind of work. I mean, horrible, horrible things. Because, as she says in the book, that they had all been taught that only humans have minds. Only humans could actually make a tool and all this kind of stuff. This is in the 1960s, for criminy sakes, right? And then she says, I sure is a good thing I didn't go to university, she says in the book at the time, because she said, I would not have gotten that picture or gotten that close had I not recognized the sentience and the intelligence of all the creatures that she was involved with. And I really believe, and I'm so glad you brought that up, I believe that is the foundation of our problems. I think our arrogance starts with our superiority over other creatures. And do we have time for me to tell a little story?
sure.
Okay, so to connect that to the vision quest. I think it was my 4th Sundance I was preparing for, but I was living in Idaho. I was no longer on the reservation, and I had not gone to Arizona yet. And so I was at altitude in cool weather, and it was July, and the Sundance was about 2 weeks away, and the predictions were 114 degrees in the sun. And, without water, you don't drink water for 4 days in a Sundance. And 114 is pretty serious, right? I'm going to hold on.
So 4 Arrows is taking care of his dog at the moment, barking. So he'll be right back.
I apologize. We have somebody coming in. My dog was letting us know here in Mexico. He might bark again. Okay. So anyway, I'm worried about the water problem for this Sundance and the heat. And I'm thinking, maybe I have to go, but what am I going to do? And B says, why don't you go up on the mountain? So I went up on the mountain to cry for a vision, and I had made my tobacco ties, and I sit in the middle of the tobacco ties, and right away a rat-like creature comes into them and starts eating the tobacco. I'm still in my Western mindset, I guess is the best way to say it. I kick this creature out of the circle. And in doing that, I realize what I've done, that this is, I've done enough vision quests before that, knowing how dumb I was. And I'm now feeling this regret that I'm going to be up here holding my chinupa in this circle for 24 hours and nothing's going to happen. I'm having those kinds of thoughts. I'm just so disappointed in myself for not having got in tune before I stepped into the circle. When all of a sudden it comes back and it starts eating the tobacco again. And now I'm going, yes, this is so cool. This is so cool. And it comes in, it sits in the circle facing the west. And the same direction I am, like this dog that's next to me growling here. And now I know this is it. But now my mind is going, I can't wait to get down back into my house to get on the computer to find out what this is all about. Because I'm in Idaho, I'm ignorant of the flora and fauna. You know, I don't have that knowledge. And all I know is this is a powerful answer to my vision. And I don't know what it means, right? But then I realized that's another mistake I'm making. You have to stay up here and let it sink in and all that. So I do. I go down the next morning. I just did a one-day quest. And I burn my clothes, start the fire for the inipi. But what do? I run naked up the stairs, get on my computer. My wife knows she can't talk to me until after I come out of the inipi, so she doesn't say anything. But later she said, you sure baffled me when I saw you come down from the mountain and get on the darn computer. But here's the punchline. I type in mammals of North America to find out what kind of a rodent this was. And there it was, big legs, a long tail. And it said the Latin name, and then it said kangaroo rat, the only animal in North America that can go a lifetime without a drop of water. And, you know, and so, I mean, and that, there's so many stories I could tell like that, but I just wanted to show how what you're saying about these losses and these misunderstandings about who we are and what we're surrounded by. Once you start to have these experiences, you realize what we've all lost growing up in this culture.
What you're talking about is an experience of synchronicity, of finding the connections among your experiences and the greater reality, and that's something Carl Jung emphasized and others who how important those are, that you're actually tuning in to the greater reality when you notice those things and are open to them. And again, we kind of we're taught to ignore those things. The schooled mind is really an unfortunate thing. I mean, it's useful to be thinking, use thinking and logic, conscious reasoning for solving problems. And we've always done that as human beings, but the larger part of our capacities is not that. It's this, again, this participation mystique, what Marvin Bram, the historian, calls polysemy, where you're able to shapeshift and be connected to all sorts of entities and feel, and you're in the present moment fully and grandly, I mean, it's a happy place to be in the present moment. But civilization has moved us into this problem-solving mindset of logical thinking. And I think now we're in a pandemic right now, and parents are worried about their children not learning as much in school, all the school book learning. But this is the chance now to actually learn real things, how to be in the natural world, how to receive and understand the signals that are going on, and to be, a member of the Earth community rather than just book learning and test taking.
I think that the spiritual component, I love Carl Jung's work, and I use synchronicity all the time. More and more in my old age, I'm seeing that synchronicity in this idea of this participatory mystique, where you really can't separate yourself from other, is really the work of an invisible world of energies that for eons we refer to in indigenous cultures around the world as spiritual entities of some sort. We see them, when I started doing the Uwipi and the Inipi ceremonies, I would see, like last night, we would see these sort of shapes of creatures or peoples. These are things that that we seldom talk about publicly, but I think more and more it's important to talk about these sacred things, because we're all allies and we're all in the same sinking boat right now. And once you begin to tune in to the spiritual world, they become more and more pronounced. So for me, this kangaroo rat was a body inhabited by a spirit that came to give me this sense of understanding. I really believe that you bring up COVID. I'm writing this book that's going to be very similar to what you and I are writing, but it's just about Sitting Bull and opening with his quotes. And I chose Sitting Bull because even though he's known as a warrior, he was really a sun dancer, a spiritual healer. That was his really main work, and he was doing it at a time when he was watching and experiencing the loss of his world. And I thought, wow, that's what we have to do. We're losing our world. We are in the throes of a sixth mass extinction. Having hope, as much as I know that's important to people, I think is a falsehood that doesn't help us. I think that we have to be agnostic to a degree. We have to understand that we cannot know what is happening in all ways, but we also have to realize that what is happening is a very, very serious extinction rate experience, and denying it isn't going to help, nor is fear and panic, which is why we try to. Most people, even the beautiful and wonderful David Attenborough, just had at 93, did a most wonderful, and he was very frank. And yet I listened carefully to his words, and he made statements like, well, humans are the most intelligent and we've got to do such and such, or, this sort of and I don't think that's in his heart, but it's still in the language. If we can walk in our bodies to know how beautiful this world is, seeing the beauty all around. Like, I would love to end our presentation with playing the Cherokee, the Trail of Tears lullaby that mothers sang to their children on the Trail of Tears, reminding them of the beautiful clouds above and the dancing grasses and the colors of the trout and the sounds of the meadowlarks, right? I think that's where we want to be with our children now. We want to be in a place where we don't, depending on the ages and all this kind of stuff, but we don't want to pretend like what is happening is not happening, because they are spirits in bodies, and their spirits know at some level. And that hypocrisy, I think, has to not be the mainstay. It has to be, wow, things are tougher and are getting tougher, but let's see the beauty. Let's help others see the beauty. Let's be caring, and let's practice this cat fawn and the generosity and the fearlessness. When I say fearlessness, most Western philosophers, including Socrates, say it's foolishness. But I know a lot of activists, and courage used over and over again takes up energy. It's stressful. But what I've learned from my time living with the Kumquat Indians of Mexico and the Tarahumara, and with small groups of others who, that mostly have become Christianized and lost their traditional ways, I've seen it. I've seen it at Standing Rock in my 4 tours of duty. Once somebody with our original worldview, I like to call it, musters the courage to take a stand, to make take an action that's the right action. And in indigenous cultures, I love what Martin Brokenleg says, that the highest expression of courage is generosity, right? And so with all that in mind, you take that energy. Well, let me give an example of how to move from courage to fearlessness. And maybe that's a good place for us to close after I hear how you relate this, because I always learn so much from you. To the nest, the evolving nest. I love to jump off of cliffs into rivers. And I got a place on our summer place on the west coast of Vancouver Island, where there's a place that's about 30 feet up, and the bears climb up it to grab salmon that go up the waterfall. So I climb up it just like the bears do. And then right next to the waterfall, I dive into the base of the waterfall. And I always check beforehand, make sure there's no logs floating there. Well, each time I do it, I feel that thing we call fear, and I have to get that thing we call courage in order to jump. But where it turns to fear is in indigenous ways of thinking. And I think this is what the man taught his little boy. Once you get the courage to act, from that point on, you trust the universe. Because you've made the right decision and there's no more having to muster the courage for it. You are now in the process of being alive with it. And so now I go up to that top of that ledge and I have to get the courage. But as soon as my feet leave the ledge, I don't need courage anymore. And I am totally trusting the universe. And I've noticed with this exercise, and there's other ways to do it, I'm sure, that don't require jumping off of cliffs. But Darcia, I notice things more. On that 2 or 3 second, maybe it's only 2 second fall, I see the birds that are flying over. I see fish that fly under. When I feel the breeze in ways that I never felt when I just used courage. When I hit the water, it's like an experience from heaven. It's like the event itself, without having any concern, and going, oh, thank goodness I made it and it's over with. It's a completely different experience, right? And so I think that part of this is this work that we're all trying to do in this time of the pandemic. This is a small thing compared to what's going to happen next if we don't address, and even maybe if we do address the causes of it, the deforestation, the things we're doing, and we're not paying any attention to that now. And so the next warning is going to be a bigger one. And I think right now it's time, and I would love if I could, before we close, just to read a sentence from Margaret Wheatley about what I'm talking about. But does this make sense from the EvolvedNest perspective that you have?
Yes. So I would say also, just to expand what you're saying, is we're really in the nest. The earth is our nest, right? And we all are being loved by the earth, and we're kind of been shunning the earth, been mistreating and disrespecting the earth, and now the consequences are coming to the fore. And so part of that nestedness is that you're never alone. I mean, the kangaroo rat was there with you. You were not alone. Every tree or animal or insect is a partner. It's not about just you're, isolated. We have an epidemic of loneliness in the United States, in part because people have forgotten how to connect, right? They're not receptively attuned. And that's the thing we can get back to. And when you understand that we're all in this nest together, and the nest is collapsing, the earth is collapsing, at least the part that sustains humans and other animals. But we're still nested. I mean, our elements were stardust, earth dust, and the next world will be some new thing. And so in a way, we're eternal. So to not worry so much about, grasping on to whoever you think you are at the moment, just be part of the nest, the interactive, dynamic way of being with everything that is, in that what you describe as you're diving off the cliff is that full present moment of connection and realization and awareness. Yes. And the happiness in that moment. We can still be there and accompany the sadness and the loss of creatures, of species at the same time. So I think it's being as a partner with the whole earth, with our landscape, which are particular trees and animals around us, to be partners with them and not dominate and feel superior, but we're, friends. So it's that kind of thing. I think we want to emphasize that it's not, in a way, it's not hope, it's being, it's partnering, it's acknowledging and respecting and being fully ourselves in the moment and fully accepting of the other.
Well, I mean, and you said exactly what she said in a different and beautiful way equally. Let me just close then with kind of repeating that from her words in my preface for the Sitting Bull book. She says, we're not the first generation that looks into the future with fear and dread. If we have the courage to see clearly, we accept that we are in the sixth extinction, that our wondrous planet is at great risk, that we humans continue to take too much and give too little. Yet facing reality is a fearsome challenge. If we see clearly, we will be overwhelmed with despair. If we turn away, we join the masses of people who withdraw into self-protection and intentional blindness. And then I'll read this one last paragraph. She says, for those of us who still want to make a difference, for we who take responsibility for future generations, what are we to do? What can we contribute to stop the terrifying destruction and to prepare for even more destruction? What do we do with our great compassionate desire to serve our time well? And then she goes on to say essentially what you said, that for those of us who long to serve this troubled world, for those of us who realize it's our turn to serve as others have before us, if we take responsibility for shifting our worldview, then we can walk with confidence and joy in spite of what's happening. So that's Margaret Wheatley, and I've got Margaret Wheatley and Darcia Narvaez with me. I can't go wrong, man.
With me, with Four Arrows, you're just so marvelous. Thank you so much for your mentoring and for your leadership and insight and your fearlessness. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Okay, watch it. Let me get the flute so we can do this closing song.
All right. Thank you. Please do look up Four Arrows work, fourarrowsbooks.com. I think it's what it is. Yep.
And this is a lullaby that Carlos Nakai taught me, a Cherokee lullaby. The words, I don't know how to sing them, but they are, like I said earlier, they're a mother on this trail of tears singing to their child, saying, honey, things are very difficult, but did you see the beautiful clouds, the animals in them? Did you see the beautiful grasses dancing in the prairie? Did you hear the beautiful songs of the birds? Did you see the colors of the fish when we crossed the brook? Those kinds of things. So I ask everyone to just maybe close your eyes and just hear the courage and the love and the understanding that we are spirits inhabiting bodies, and how that works in a world similar to the one we're experiencing.
And I'll stop the recording after.
All right.